Good day, students. This is the third part of internal regulation, and we'll be talking about the skin. Don't forget that part 1 we talk about the lungs and the kidney, part 2 we major on the liver. This time around we'll be talking about the skin. Now the skin is a major organ that performs homeostatic regulation, and the way the temperature is being regulated in vertebrates and other higher vertebrates differs. You will see that the temperature of many vertebrates, like we talk about amphibians and reptiles, vary widely. Regulating their temperature has to do with their metabolic heat produced in the body. It has to do with the heat received from the nearby warm object. It also has to do with heat loss by evaporation of water from the skin. But that is why these animals, like amphibians and reptiles, they are called Poikilothermic animals, because they regulate their temperature based on the metabolic heat produced, the heat received from the warm object around them, then the heat loss by evaporation from water from the skin. But mammals and birds, they have fairly constant body temperature because they have mechanism of controlling it, and that is why they are regarded as homeothermic organisms or homeothermic animals. So the temperature control is coordinated by a temperature control center in the brain that is attached to the sense organs located on all over the body, especially in the skin. So when we talk about the skin as an organ in homeostasis, we will talk about the major function of temperature regulation. Now, the layers of the skin. The skin of mammals is mainly an organ for temperature control, and it consists of two main layers. We have the epidermis and the dermis. The epidermis can also be subdivided into three layers: the cornified layer, which is the outer layer, the granular layer, the middle layer, and the Malpighian layer, which is the innermost layer. Now let's take a look at this structure of the skin. This is the epidermis, and the rest from here to here is the dermis. We also have the subcutaneous layer, which we can call the adipose layer or the fat layer. So you will see that I said that this epidermis can be subdivided. Notice some things that are here can be divided into cornified, the granular, and the Malpighian layer. So notice some things that are present here, and note also some things that are present in the dermis. So let's take them one after the other. The layer of the epidermis of skin. The first layer, which is the outermost layer, is called the cornified layer. It is made up of dead cells impregnated with keratin, and that keratin is a type of protein, a fibrous protein that contains lots of sulphur, of which hair, feathers, and nails are made of. So the cornified layer is very rich in keratin, and I said the keratin is a fibrous protein that contains sulphur, from which the hair, the skin, you can see that those are the hair, the feathers, the nails. Those are the things you have outside the skin that they are made from. Then the keratin makes the layer tough and flexible. It also makes the skin, the outer skin of the layer, waterproof. By the time we talk about the general function, you will see that the skin is waterproof and helps reduce the amount of water absorption into the skin. So this is done by the keratin. The second layer, which is the granular layer, it contains living cells, unlike the cornified layer that contains dead cells. That is why even when you just finish bathing, if you take white handkerchief and scrape it on the skin, you will see that there will be a blackish or dirty material on the white handkerchief. That shows dead cells from the cornified layer. But instead of that, the granular layer is made up of living cells produced from the third layer, which is the Malpighian layer. So they are constantly being pushed up to replace cells of the Cornified layer. So what they do is that they gradually move to the upper layer. Those cells also come from the third layer. Then the third layer, which is the Malpighian layer, consists of actively dividing cells, which provide cells for the granular and the Cornified layer. The cells contain melanin, a pigment which imparts colors to the skin. So we can see that melanin has its own function. It helps to absorb ultraviolet rays and give the dark pigment. That is why you see that people in the region where there is a sunny weather, they are usually black, because the melanin absorbs the ultraviolet rays and produce dark coloration instead. So that melanin is present at the epidermis. Okay, so now let's talk about the dermis, which is the second layer. Now the dermis is the connective tissue after the epidermis, and some things are found in it: the blood capillaries, the hair follicles, the sweat glands, the sebaceous glands, and the sensory nerve endings, including the adipose tissue. So if we look at the blood capillaries, the blood capillary is the one that supplies nutrients and oxygen for tissue respiration, and it can also remove waste from the dermis. So it is very necessary, and it is there in the dermis. Hair follicle is also there. You can see is the one that supports the air outside the body. The sweat gland is also another gland that has another opening through the sweat pore, from which sweat is being released out of the body. The sebaceous gland releases oil and lubricate the skin. The nerve endings also help the sensitivity function of the skin. The sensory nerve endings, that is, all these are embedded in the dermis. Then the fat layer are present. So this is what we talk about when we mentioned the dermis. You have the hair follicle, you have the sebaceous gland. It is very close to the hair follicle and secretes its oil through the hair follicle. We also have the nerves, the nerve endings present there. We have the different other things that are present in the nerve cells. Now, what are the general functions of the skin? The skin carries out important functions throughout various mechanisms. Notable among these are protection, temperature control, sensitivity, and excretion. These four major functions are key functions in the skin. We know that the skin protects, especially the dead cells in the epidermis layer, protects the skin from harmful microorganisms that can be outside the surface of the skin. So the epidermis, which is the fibrous tissue layer, protects the skin so that the microorganisms are not easily penetrated into the body. The skin also regulates body temperature by vasoconstriction and vasodilation. That's also a major topic, major function of the skin, which I will want you to read in details. Sensitivities. Now, the skin is also sensitive to different receptors of touch, of pain, of cold, of heat, and all those things. And it also performs the function of excretion by releasing waste from the body. The waste in form of sweat contain urea, water, and some other waste material. So I want you to read this general function and know in details the function of the skin. Thank you for listening.